Hi everyone. This week we're going to be looking at the early history of social welfare. So last week we looked at our individual values and how these interact with and intersect with social institutions, and how through that process we construct these social realities in our society. And this week, sort of building on that, we're going to be looking at how the values of society influence our responses to social issues. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the social welfare system. And when we talk about the social welfare system, what we're really talking about is how our society historically has viewed poverty and economic inequality, and how its values have influenced how society then responds to poverty and economic inequality. And Tratner says the basic tenets and programs of any social welfare system reflect the values of the society in which the system functions. And essentially what Tratner does over the 5 chapters that you're asked to read for this week is traces how society's values, going back to ancient culture through English poor law, and then beginning in colonial America, through the Civil War and post-Civil War period, how values in America have shifted in terms of how we view poverty, and how that has influenced our response as a society to poverty. The earliest origins of social welfare are evident in the values of ancient cultures. Tratner refers to the ancient Babylonians, who valued hospitality to strangers. You can go back to Buddhism, which espouses virtues of love and charity. The origins of social welfare are heavily evident in religions, and have been historically very much influenced by religion. Tratner cites the Jewish doctrine of duty to give and the right to receive. And within Christianity, the idea of doing good deeds, of loving your enemies, and entry into heaven through mercy and charity. And in both the Jewish and Christian doctrines, you can see this concept of mutual aid that you read about last week. This idea of helping your neighbor and taking care of those in need. So those are some of the earliest origins of social welfare. And during the medieval period, poverty was viewed as a permanent and inescapable feature of society. So it was sort of part of this almost natural hierarchical order of things that determined that there would be people at the top and the bottom, and it was not necessarily through the fault of anyone that occurred. It was just sort of how it was, and that those with resources were obligated to share their wealth with the poor. During the medieval period, feudalism provided a structure and a form of social insurance. The way society was organized sort of allowed for the structure of the fiefdoms to take care of their own, so to speak. Also during this period, you saw the establishment of hospitals and guilds, which also provided relief to individuals in need. And perhaps, as Tratner notes, most critically, churches became a primary source of organizing the distribution of resources to those in need. And really the origins of the English poor law, which wouldn't come about until 1601, the origins of the English poor law can really be traced back to this, or it can be argued that it can be traced back to this idea of churches, which are public institutions that require members to pay a tithe, and through tithing, resources are generated that can then be redistributed to those in need. So the tithing really functions as a compulsory tax, which, if you think about our system today, we have a system that is based on collecting taxes that are then redistributed and used to assist those in need, although to what extent we can definitely argue about. So I'm going to just sort of to lay out a very simple timeline for you, because I know sometimes it's been a while since we've had a history class, just to sort of visually orient you to the periods we're talking about. And really, I am less concerned with you remembering or retaining, the exact dates and names and places of the historical times that Tratner takes us through. I'm more concerned with you understanding the how and the why. the how we have viewed poverty historically, and why we've responded to it in the way that we have. There are a few themes that I'm going to lay out for you that I think will help guide you through the reading. The first theme is, how has poverty been conceptualized at different points in American history? So at each of those points, whether we're talking about colonial America, the Revolutionary period, sort of the period that interceded between the American Revolution and the Civil War, and then the post-Civil War or late 1800s leading up to industrialization, how we have viewed poverty in each of those periods has informed how, as a society, we responded to it. And throughout those periods, there has been the influence of religion, this sort of tension between humanism and moralism, and this sort of shifting view of as we saw, sort of left over from the medieval period, of poverty as a natural condition, to later with the Great Awakening, being viewed as an individual malady, something that was a moral failure or flaw in the individual. And then later, as we see sort of post-Civil War during the Charity Society movement, poverty comes to be viewed as more of a structural or environmental issue. And Trattner outlines these in much more detail in the book than I'm going to go into here, but this is just to sort of give you a framework and context to think about that. The second key theme to think about as you're reading is, how did the prevailing understanding of poverty influence the social response? So as I mentioned early on, social welfare was very much depended on this concept of mutual aid. But over time, we see that sort of, benevolent, help your neighbor, being characterized as helping those who are deserving versus not helping those who are undeserving. And how do these sort of categories of deserving versus undeserving get defined and shift and change over time? Along with that, what is the changing role of government involvement in the social response to poverty? So, we saw in the medieval times, it was very much sort of an attitude of sort of taking care of your own, and within the fiefdom. And then we saw sort of the emergence of various organizations that became involved with providing relief, and eventually led to with the English Poor Laws, of the government involvement. And that has also sort of ebbed and flowed over time. And these concepts of indoor relief versus outdoor relief, and public relief versus private charity, how did these change and shift over time? So in colonial America, we had, just to give you an example, we viewed poverty as part of a God-given hierarchical order. The poor were viewed with pity and as in need of help. Public assistance was provided through compulsory taxation, very much similar to the English Poor Law structure. And we saw these puritanical ideals of hard work and the sin of idleness begin to emerge in our responses to poverty. And it's here that we really see this deserving versus undeserving dichotomy begin to emerge in American social welfare. During the Revolutionary period, which was influenced by both the Great Awakening in the earlier period, and then later later by the Enlightenment, we see an increased emphasis on human responsibility. We see the emergence of private charity as a response. We also see cooperative partnership initially between private charity and public aid, right? So between private charities and the government, there initially is sort of a cooperative relationship there that does not necessarily sustain itself through time. Also, with the establishment of the Constitution, the emphasis on states' rights, Trattner asserts, has had a long-lasting impact on how the government responds to poverty in the United States today. Because there's this emphasis on states' rights, there's a lot of flexibility to address poverty in different ways, within the states. But at the same time, there has not always been a strong response from the central government. So there are challenges created by that as well. In the mid to late 1800s, we see the scientific charity movement evolve, and here poverty is influenced by industrialization and the emergence of capitalism. We see during this period the origins of casework. We see the formation of charity organizations, which if you think of an organization today like United Way, that's sort of an umbrella organization for a number of organizations. We sort of see that type of structure emerging during the scientific charity movement. And it's here that we begin to see the shift from poverty being viewed as an individual malady or a moral flaw in the individual to being a structural issue that is impacted by industrialization, by the effects of cities, of environmental factors. We also really see here the role of power dynamics. And Trattner, I don't know that he so much explicitly uses the term power dynamics, but he does talk in detail about friendly visitors, which really are the basis for casework that we do today, or the origins of casework that we do today, and how the dynamics between friendly visitors and the individuals they were working with, there was a significant power differential involved with that based on class, race, a number of social factors, socioeconomic factors. We also see with the ending of the Civil War, and you'll read about the Freedmen's Bureau, you will see how segregation began to become institutionalized in our social welfare system. So the third theme, and I kind of touched on it a little bit in the scientific charity movement, how has social work today been influenced? So you're going to read about the origins of casework and really nonprofit organizations. How has this history influenced our values and code of ethics? This idea of social control versus social treatment. An argument can be made that social work has historically been market conforming, meaning that it has been used to exert social control to really reinforce and support what's happening economically in the country, which very much is counterintuitive to what we as social workers believe we do, right? We believe that we are working to hopefully end injustices and empower people to be able to overcome oppressions that exist in society. But really the question is, are we doing that? On an individual level, that may be our value and what we intend to do, but structurally, is that what we are doing, or are we supporting a system that is perpetuating inequalities? And there's no easy answers to this. I'm just throwing that out there as a question and something to think about as you think about how social work today has been influenced. So that is a really quick overview of Trattner and of a lot of history. But I wanted to give you just sort of some context and some thematic ways to think about what you're reading. Your discussion assignment for this week lays out a number of questions to guide your readings, and you'll be asked to respond to 2 of those questions in your discussion assignment post for this week. So those questions will also allow you to think about what Trattner has laid out in more detail. But again, I wanted to just give you some ways to sort of thematically think about what you're reading. So I hope this has been helpful. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me or post in the Ask the Instructor forum. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to everybody soon.